Hey folks, thanks for stopping by and checking out the Business Line podcast. In this show, what we're trying to do is get in front of people all over the country, all over the world that are moving and shaking in business, whether they're a part of a big business or they're starting something from the ground up. We want to get to know them. We want to get to know their journey, their struggle, and a little bit about what they love in life. We hope you check out every episode you can. Well, hey, Bill, welcome to the Business Line podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, man. No, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, hey, I'm incredibly excited too, because I'm just having a little bit of a kind of existential moment where I'm going back in time a little bit to the early 2000s. I'm, in college trying to finish up the 5.5 to 6 year program.
Yes.
That I was really only supposed to do 4. And I'm spending a lot of time playing video games that I should be probably doing class and, trying to get wikis and codes and learn about the latest news and stuff. And here I find myself on, an old dial-up modem or, on a T1 in my dorm room on IGN and all these other sites.
Oh,
and then I learned the other day that, you were marketing IGN back in those days.
Yeah.
So, but before we get into that, I just really want to shout out to Wayne Chang for kind of introducing us to us. We've had a lot of folks over the last couple months just come, onto the show just from that conversation we had with Wayne. Really neat guy. And just want to say, Wayne, thanks a lot for being a friend of the show.
Oh, Wayne's awesome. Social just amazing. Great. Some great gaming memories there. But yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah. So let's go back in time a little bit with how you met Wayne. Those are the Command and Conquer days, right?
Correct. Yeah. So first off, I'm a little jealous you had a T1 because I remember dialing back in those days. It was a 14.4 or 28.8 modem. So I'm already instantly jealous that you had that.
Our school put in brand new apartments and we were just geeked because we could plug our Xboxes into every little room in the suite and they were all connected via T1.
Oh my God.
And that seemed like light speed.
Oh yeah, that was amazing. So I went to University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and it was around junior year that Command and Conquer came out, and I instantly fell in love with it. I was always kind of a gamer, I love like Doom and Quake, and did some competitive leagues. But when Command and Conquer came out, it was just real-time strategy. I loved it. It was fascinating. And, and at the same time, like Kali came out, which was this protocol that allowed you to play other people. And I just got more and more into it. Right. And, it started getting very competitive. And then I started to meet more people in the space. And that's when we kind of did the Cases Ladder. There were 4 of us that kind of co-founded it. And it was basically a ranking system. And
so did you guys just get together and say, we got to figure out a way to organize this? Or how did you guys come about like thinking to do that back then?
I think in some ways it was like we wanted to play each other, but there wasn't any way to rank, right? There was no in-game ranking systems back then. And Case had originally kind of came up with the idea of having this kind of ranking system. And he was one of the players, Command and Conquer. So, we had played for a long time and we were friends. And then we started to bring these different elements together. I was kind of more the business person, Jeremy or Case, he was more the developer. We had Greg, he kind of knew servers. We had all these different elements that were part of it. And we started to bring them in. And then later on, like, Case's Ladder acquired Jay Severson's, who I believe you talked to as well, for those that watch the chess.com episode. He did tournaments, and so we had rankings and tournaments together. But it was crazy. Like, we were literally doing this like right out of college and our first startup, and it was just a ton of fun.
Yeah, back then I just remember, everything was done. This was right around that point where everybody was still kind of getting together either on one screen or a couple screens or a couple computers in someone's house or right. And you guys were literally pioneering how to do this from different time zones, right?
It was crazy. I will say that the Kali program, like that allowed to do those connections. We were more about the rankings and the tournament side of it, right? But
that was a big deal because everybody wanted to know who's the best.
Yes. Yeah, right? Totally. Right. And it was, the ladder system was ingenious because the way it worked is, if you had 100 people on the ladder and you played the number one person and you won, let's say you were ranked 100, they were ranked number 1, you would move up half the distance. Okay. So you would go to number 50. And what it meant is like people were always kind of hopping ahead of each other. So it really was like a system that made you had to play a lot if you wanted to raise up that ladder. And there were just epic battles and it was just a ton of fun.
And be willing to play someone who's technically far ahead of rank, right? If you really wanted to bounce.
Yeah. And all the times you just go into servers, like who was there and like, oh, you want to do, cases match? Sure. Right. And you'd compete like, what rank are you? And then sometimes too, number 1 rank, you'd have to play everybody else. Right. And sometimes people would get that and try to avoid playing people. I mean, there was just a lot of fun stuff that would kind of go into it, but it was a blast though.
Yeah, I wish I could say I did some of that when I was young, but I was literally I would play Command and Conquer, mainly Red Alert when it came out.
Yeah, sure.
I just play through skirmishes. I just jump in maps and try to meticulously move things around. But you guys were figuring out kind of how to game the games a little bit so to get competitive advantage and win. But that was kind of the real paper, scissors, rock about it, right?
Yeah.
Against somebody else.
I remember we were playing competitively and you're playing people from all over. So you're just getting all these different strategies. And I remember at one point I was playing a friend I kind of knew and he was at work and he's like, oh, I play Command and Conquer and we do LANs, right? So we would just play each other. And all they had played was each other, right? They never played anyone else broader. And so he's like, oh, I'm pretty confident I could beat you, Bill, right? And so we go in there and it was like, he just got eviscerated because like you'd only played like a couple other people. You had no idea of the different strategies that would come out of it. So, competitive gaming was a ton of fun early in the day.
Yeah, and that's shifted a lot. So with Case's Ladder, what came next? When did you kind of... Because that was kind of during kind of college years. You were obviously studying stuff. Yeah. Were you in business? Is that what you were studying?
I was in business. Yeah, I studied marketing, supply chain management. But I was always fascinated with internets, and I was reading, Fortune, Forbes, and Business Week, Wall Street Journal in like 5th grade. I was a business nerd. I always loved this stuff, right? So after Cases, we got acquired there. It wasn't a huge exit, but we did get some nice. Yeah. Side change for that.
Something that somebody wanted, right?
Yeah, you got it, right? Yeah. And the funny thing with Cases too was just one last little thing on that was the biggest pivot we made that ended up being like huge for the company was we were in all these real-time strategy games that we loved, right? We were in Quake and Command and Conquer and StarCraft and all that. But at the time, like those weren't as big. And a lot of times college kids didn't have that much money. Where we made a ton of money was the classic cards, right? So it was like all these like older demographics that were playing hearts and spades and pinochle. And we introduced like rankings and tournaments and ladders in there.
Oh, really? That was in there. Oh, yeah. Everybody was playing those because those were just on the systems, right?
Classic games, right? Yeah. And they were, and they worked with all these different online systems, but nobody had rankings and tournaments, right? And so we introduced gold and it was a one-time payment. And then like we said, oh, wow, people are paying this. Like, let's introduce platinum. And then it was like a much higher payment, and it was monthly. And then they were still paying that. I'm like, well, what's next? We started too high in the precious metal. So we went to diamond, right? And and people get advanced, stats and records, and their name would have a little like gold icon next to it.
So we have you guys to thank for all the shenanigans we have now in the world, right?
I apologize for that, but hey, it made the company profitable and it helped with an eventual exit. So, that was fun there. So anyway, after that, I moved over. I had one or two stops in between, but I went to IGN Entertainment. Which was a ton of fun. They brought me in to kind of like lead up their marketing, to do a lot of the subscription side of the house, which I was really familiar with. And that was just an incredible experience too. I mean, I felt so lucky because I remember...
How old you were at the time? Maybe 22, 23-ish? Or...
Oh, geez. I don't know. I have to go back. Yeah, probably around there, 23, 24, somewhere.
Like this is green behind the ears kind of stuff. I mean, you've done some really cool stuff, but as far as... IGN wasn't huge then, but they're a media company.
They were, right? They were getting pretty big, right? And I just learned a ton about how to build that brand. We grew a lot. We did a roll-up model, so we acquired GameSpy, we acquired Rotten Tomatoes. We just started growing to this massive network. I learned about SEO. I learned about programmatic advertising. Did a lot of content, and we just grew. Up to a point where we were acquired by News Corp, right? And News Corp came in, bought, I think it was like $650 million. And then I went on to run centralized marketing for all of those, different properties. So everything from like Fox Sports to Fox.com to Wall Street Journal to American Idol. But IGN always has a special place in my heart, as a gamer and as a kid that loved games growing up, to be able to work for like a gaming review site. And I remember we had a LAN room in there, Brian. It was amazing. We built out this like 16 Xbox connected LAN where we would play these massive Halo games after work. And it was literally some of the most fun I've had in my life. When you work for a gaming company, you just feel so fortunate to be a part of it.
Yeah, so take me back to that. Tell me, what was IGN like back then? I mean, I've just got the history of, from a consumer. I never even went so far as to sign up to be like for an IGN subscription or anything. But as a consumer of their content, I saw their ads. I probably bought a lot of the stuff that has ads on those, right? But what was the culture like back then? Smaller, more concise. It sounds like whether it was the content creators or you guys in marketing or maybe production folks, was everybody just kind of like a tight knit team, or what was that like back then?
Yeah, it was. So it was a big media company, right? At the end of the day, it was a media company, and IGN Entertainment, we targeted a certain demographic that advertisers wanted.
The content was different back then too.
Content was different, yeah. But, we started branching out into, so we had PC gaming content, we had Xbox, we had PS3, whatever the different gaming content was at the time. And, we do reviews, we do previews, we do cheat codes.
You guys were doing movie kind of stuff too, right?
Even movie content, right? Yeah, started expanding into that as well. And so, and then like, how do you monetize that, right? So you monetize that by, advertisers coming in and doing like, full page, homepage takeovers and buying interstitials and med recs. So there's that whole side of the house, right? Where you're a little bit more B2B and you're selling to different other companies that want to advertise. And then there was a subscription element. So we had an IGN Insider where you could get access to additional
My buddy was
reviews.
an insider. I'm like, why are you paying for that?
Totally. Deep dive content and stuff like that. So, it was, classic media. And again, in media reaches everything. So as a marketer, you spent a lot of time and think about like, how do we get more people coming? Like I said, we did a lot of SEO was really big for us at the time. A lot of people didn't know SEO, and I just spent a lot of time learning it. And so we applied that to every single review, preview, a lot of cross-linking, a lot of, on-page optimization, link popularity, just anything you could do to kind of get that overall reach out. And that had a huge effect. It ended up growing us much faster.
SEO back then was a fresher kind of thing too, right? It was it a little more cut and dry in how to get in there, manipulate it, and take advantage of it than it is now?
I think it was one of those that, and I often tell this to people that are just trying to like grow their own career is like, even online marketing now, even B2B marketing, there's always new advances and technologies that are coming out every single day. And a lot of times there's no classes or schools that you can go to. You just have to go out and devote yourself and learn it. So SEO for me was, I just spent after work every day, I spent another 4 hours reading every single forum, every single article, every single interview I could. I was closely following Matt Cutts, from Google, and just trying to understand this better, reading about, Black Hat, SEO, White Hat SEO. Yeah. And you just devoted yourself to it, right? And I think like we definitely had a first mover advantage because a lot of people were familiar with how the algorithm worked and different ways to kind of tweak it.
So I'm maybe not. Hopefully I don't get ahead of myself in assuming this. It sounds like, whether I go back to the Cases Ladder stuff you were doing, you were enjoying it, but you were building something there. Yeah. And even with IGN, what you said was relatively simple to follow, but profound, and that a lot of people aren't willing to cross that boundary. So I talk to folks that work with or for me a lot, and they're, it's like, Brian, I'm not getting any further. I don't feel like I'm getting any better than this. And I said, well, what do you do when you punch out? And I go home, have some dinner, turn on the tube, chill out, go spend some time with my girlfriend, do whatever, go out to the bars or whatever. I said, well, so what do you do when you're at work? Well, I go do this, like, let's say it's sales. I go do this, I'll reach out, I'll follow up, I'll do some drop-offs, I'll meet some people, I'll go to some meetings, blah, blah, blah. You're only kind of maintaining what you're doing at work. You're not putting any time after work trying to get better. He's like, well, I don't get paid for that. I go, you don't get paid on the clock for that. How do you talk to folks, or how did you get to the point back then? Or have you ever even thought through this of like, I'm just willing to be done and keep going because I know to some degree, when I come back, I'm going to have something I didn't have yesterday.
Yeah, it's a great point, Brian. And I was really lucky. One of my first jobs, I got a great piece of advice, which was, Bill, it doesn't matter if you're employed or not. What matters is if you're employable. And to be employable, you have to constantly be adding new skills and learning and just have that hunger, right? And I think it's really easy sometimes just to, you've got a good job, maybe it's very cushiony and you just kind of, coast, but things are always changing. And right now, like, my God, like AI is coming out and disrupting every single aspect of our lives. And I heard another good quote there, which was like, hey, you won't lose a job because of AI. You will lose your job to someone that knows how to use AI better and can do your job better because they're leveraging it, right? So I think it's just for me personally. Now, luckily, I love this stuff. Like, I'm super techie and I love new internet trends and all of AI and business and SaaS and all this different stuff. And I remember, like, during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time on just building out, like, because we were doing so many of these calls. And I just started researching like, hey, how to get better cameras and microphones. And I built out an entire studio, and like I've got like a bunch of different camera angles here, and you can kind of go through the entire studio. And it was just like a fun experience to kind of like build together, right? But for me, it's like, I love that stuff, right? To be able to just be constantly learning, I think it's so important for your career.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think what it was with me is earlier on, this would have been 10, 15 years ago, I had kind of a situation where, I kind of hit a low and I lost a job. Yeah. And I was like, you get into that immediate, wallowing in your despair. And then something just clicked and it changed. And I just learned that I had to be doing things outside of it in order to get better. Yeah. Right. So like during a day, 10 years ago, if I had to spend my day making 50 phone calls and following up on 25 emails, there was no time to learn how to do any of those things better. Because in the time where I'm making phone calls, I might be, doing a little plan, do, check, adjust on my methods during those calls, but I'm really just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I'm getting good at doing one thing the same way 50 times that day. But if the result of that day was no new meetings or no new business or no new whatever, and I just go to bed that night and wake up the next morning and do the same thing the same way, having put no effort into learning something different. I did that for a while, and then I just wasn't getting better. And it took meeting some people, successful people, learning some things, books, which I didn't like to read, all those kind of things. And everybody rolls their eyes when I say pick up a book, but I'm serious. I've got,
absolutely.
I won't mention names, but I got a couple of folks in the company I'm working with right now that, when it comes to people skills, we're just sitting down and reading weekly, going through chapter. We're doing how to win friends and influence people. They're struggling working together. They're struggling working with some of our clients. I say, okay, we got to go back to basics. Every chapter, every Monday, you're coming into my office. We're going to spend 15 minutes talking about what you learned and how to apply it. Right?
Absolutely.
So, and I'm like, don't read your book during the workday. Take 15, 20 minutes every day at home.
Yeah. So, always improving. I love it.
Yeah. So anyway, we're at IGN. Things are going great. You're building up. And IGN gets acquired, like you said, by
News Corp.
News Corp. So then what you started to manage the bigger portfolio with News Corp.
So at that point, IGN Entertainment, I think we're like 100 million rev. We had built this large portfolio of properties, everything from, Rotten Tomatoes, Aspen, IGN, GameSpy, right? And News Corp comes in. We were actually planning on going public. News Corp comes in and buys us before we go public. And so like anytime after you acquire a company, they're like, hey, how do we leverage everyone there? And, News Corp didn't have a lot of expertise on the online marketing side. And that was something I was obviously very strong at. So, I moved to more of a centralized role where I started running online marketing for all the different properties within the portfolio. And that was something that I thought worked really well, because for me, I loved to get a chance to work with all these different brands. A lot of them very iconic. Like I said, I grew up reading the Wall Street Journal as a kid, and here I am like helping them out, helping out like Fox Sports or American Idol or Fox.com or all these different, properties, and helping them build their brands, helping them, with content, with SEO, with programmatic advertising, with just, more of the cutting edge ways to grow that network. And at the time, I think we grew it to the third largest in the world. So it was, an amazing experience for me to just, again, work with these iconic brands and just, again, to constantly learn and to be exposed to new areas.
What were some of the big differences or big obstacles maybe you faces, or maybe you tripped up on moving from something that was a big deal? IGN was a big deal in a niche kind of community of people that do certain things with their time, but you move into this bigger group. What were some of the toughest things about making that transition? And take us through some of the wins and losses there.
Yeah, I think that one of the hardest things you'll find, or at least that I found, is like I've always really tried to adopt a more modern playbook. A playbook that is, has the strategies that reflect where people are, whether that's, like I said, SEO back in the day, now it might be ABM or leveraging AI tools, whatever it is, right? But a lot of times when I would start working with these different properties, they had only been doing things a certain way for a long time. And what I ended up finding was the strategy and what they should do wasn't hard. Like, that was pretty obvious. I'm like, I know what you should do. I know we can 10 extra traffic if we do this. But what ends up being hard is it's a change management exercise. You have a lot of stakeholders that have been there, have only done things for a certain way for a long time, and are resistant to change, right? And, and a lot of these technologies are new to them. They don't understand them. They're a little fearful of them. They want to kind of keep the status quo. So at least for me, like as I started moving into, higher and higher leadership positions and working across multiple properties, like that's what I ended up really understanding was a lot of what you're doing in marketing is not the actual tactics. You're trying to educate all these different stakeholders, the board members, the CFO, the CRO, the CEO, the founder on like why you need to do these things, what they are, and to make sure they have the resources to go and implement them so that they can see the results. Like that was very challenging for me. Yeah.
And stick with them. I'll give you a really good example. So our company, Panacea, right now, we have a couple different brands. We've kind of departmentalized the big things and almost like, we have our IT service management brand, we have our revenue cycle management brand, our remote scribes and stuff. So, when we got started with the IT stuff, where it was all kind of grassroots, so let's just hire some cold callers and just bootstrap it. We got a couple clients, and then we hired a small boutique digital marketing firm, and they were very helpful. But what we found there is for what we were able to invest in that relationship, we could only afford a little bit of their time.
Sure.
And then kind of the basic things that needed to be done, right? Once a month, we'll give you a half an hour to sit down and talk. We'll review what happened last month and let you know what's going on this month. And we just found we needed more. So we're like, okay, let's hire internally some people that are really good at what they do, and let's build that team. And from the IT side, what we said is let's just find someone who does this really good on nothing but IT. So we did. Shout out to Chartech out in Bakersfield. So they're doing all of our digital marketing when it comes to the IT stuff and doing a fantastic job. They've been doing it since January. Lots of great content, lots of great, whether it's email campaigns or whether it's, handling the SEO, handling the paid ads, handling the social, all that. They're doing it all, which is great. And they check in with my team, and their leaders hold my team accountable so I can work on instead of in this stuff. But it's 6 months and we're seeing lots of great activity. But when I sit down with my partners, their questions are, hey, we're paying so much for this to happen. Where's the results?
Sure.
And because the results for all three of us is where's the new business? Where's the bottom line revenue? And I said, we got to stick with it. We got to stick with it. We got to stick with it. So what's your advice to people like me and my partners who say, okay, we've already invested X number of dollars in this. We're not thinking what we should have by now from the marketing. What's your advice to say, guy, you got to stick with it? How do you know when it is and isn't working? If you see the activity, you see the content getting out there and getting interacted with, but you don't see, let's say, the form fills or the sign-ups or the meetings booked yet?
Yeah. It's a great question, right? And I think every founder, every board, struggles with this, right? Like, what is the role of marketing? How do you measure it? How do you see the impact that it has? And so what I usually would lean on is I came from a more data-driven marketing perspective, right? So I would like to track a lot of these metrics, right? And, so for instance, a lot of the areas that you talked about there was, trying to get the word out, and a lot of stuff in brand you can measure now. So you can measure aided recall, unaided recall. That's just like, hey, when someone hears about your company, do they know what it is? Or even unaided is they don't even tell you the name of the company and like, hey, tell us the, different firms in this space, right? There's sentiment, there's share voice, share conversation. There's a lot of brand metrics that you can track. And also there's a lot of funnel metrics you can track, right? From everything from, visits to, leads, MQLs, SQLs, SOL pipeline, all the way through the funnel there. So I think it always starts in marketing. You have to have that base of that foundation of having the right metrics there. Like right before this, this pod that we're doing, I was talking to one of my clients. I serve as an advisor now to a lot of high-tech startups. And we were just talking about that, right? Like, hey, where do we start? I'm like, you have to start tracking these metrics, right? Because at some point, some board member, some owner, some founder is going to ask you, what impact have you made? And you want to be able to show that you made a positive impact, that you made that difference there. Other things you can do if you're a smaller company, right? I always advise like putting a multi-touch attribution, but that costs a lot and it's expensive. You can just do like very controlled tests, right? So like at Slack, one of the things we did is when we started out and we were a little bit smaller, we said, hey, we're going to run this campaign, but we're only going to run it in 3 cities. And then we're going to have these 3 other sister cities that are very close to them that don't get the campaign. And then we're going to look at our leads and we're going to go, hey, how many leads came from these cities that we're running our advertising against, right? This idea of control groups, right? Or if you're running an ABM campaign where ABM is account-based marketing, it's just this way of saying we're only going to target a set group of companies. So maybe you have 100 perfect clients, right? They're the best ones out there, right? Well, a lot of times marketers will just run their campaign to all of them. And it's a little tough. Like, did we get that new business because of seasonality, or maybe it was something else, or we just ran this event, right? But if you only run that campaign to 50 of the 100, then you can see like, oh, wow, well, did the 50 that got all the marketing love, did they tend to close faster? Did they have a higher ASP, higher average deal size? Were they happier? Whatever metrics you look at, right? Pipe. And you start to understand. So there's a lot of tricks you can do in marketing to try to show that impact. I think what it comes down to though is like sometimes in marketing, some marketers will put in that infrastructure where you can show the impact and some don't, right? And they're very different skill sets. Some are very quants. Sometimes you get marketers that are very creatives and great storytellers, but don't know the back end infrastructure. So it can be challenging there. And a lot of times CEOs, founders, board members are like, well, I don't know. Is it working? Is it not? Like, how do we know? And so those are some ways that I've addressed it in the past.
Another thing I think that happens often is, or marketing and sales conflation, right?
Yes.
Within small company or big company or whatever. You were in B2C for a long time, lots of success there. Transition to B2B, totally different, right? I mean, B2C, someone signing up for an IGN subscription, you don't have a sales guy calling them saying, I see you opened our emails. We had a meeting. When are you gonna sign on, right? But in the B2B side, you might have some of that on the bigger end of end of things. So when it comes to that marketing, creating the curiosity and getting people to a point where they're thinking about committing, and then there's that transition into sales. How do you handle that?
So the way I think about Brian is B2C, you're doing marketing and sales all together.
All in one, yeah.
Right? Yeah, all in one. So when you go to B2B, sometimes you have this bifurcation, and a lot of times you will sometimes get some antagonistic, confrontation between marketing and sales. Like the classic one is marketing's like, I gave you a ton of leads, and the salespeople are like, the leads sucked, right? Like they were horrible.
Right. You call those hot leads?
Yeah, like so there's different ways to go about it. I mean, one, I like to put sales and marketing like on the same metric. So hey, at the end of the day, it's all closed business. It's all ARR or revenue, whatever you're looking at, right? Yep. Like when you split them out, sometimes you get weird behaviors. Like sometimes marketers will just do things to get people to fill out a form, but again, they're not your ideal clients, or they're not nurtured or not ready enough. Again, moving away from leads to even measuring all the different stages. So having a lead to a marketing qualified lead, a sales accepted lead, a sales qualified lead, that'll help you understand and get them through. And also, I think, again, like kind of getting back to my earlier point, the way people are buying is changing, right? So like now, after I moved from the B2C side, I moved to the B2B, and I'm working for SaaS. So like, Salesforce and Zendesk and Slack and all these different companies. And even there, like I would come in a lot and like, whoa, is that the right model? Is the right model that marketing just goes and gets someone to fill out a form and hand it off to a salesperson from the buy it, right? Like, now we have this way where people can start going into the product, and maybe we let them go into the product first, right? Maybe we let them buy on their own. And maybe if we do hand them off to a salesperson though, marketing is still helping them close that, right? We're still nurturing them. We're still educating them all the way through the funnel. So you start to see all these different playbooks like seed and grow, expansion. You start to see more freemium models. And again, like I think like the companies that embrace that did really well because they were open-minded about what go-to-market looks like, open-minded about the role of sales, open-minded about the role of marketing, how they work together, the metrics, open-minded about like putting them into the product quicker. And so like, I always think about that, like, hey, just because it was done a certain way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. And marketing and sales, there's a lot of ways that they can work together to achieve the outcome that you want.
You ever run into issues where, let's say marketing's doing a bang up job getting people, whether it's B2C or B2B, closing people, but then there's a product disconnect. If people get into the product and it's not what they thought it was.
Yeah.
So how do you address that when you've got to kind of walk over to the other side of the bridge and say, hey guys, we got to close this loop or we're going to lose people that we bring in?
It's tricky. So I work in tech all the time, and sometimes you have to tell founders that their baby is ugly, right? Yeah. I'm sorry. Like, I know you think this is the best thing since sliced bread, but a lot of people, are having trouble with your product. So a lot of it gets back to, I think the metrics you track. So I'm a big believer that you should track things like Net Promoter Score. I'm a big believer in product-led growth, which means that you infuse your marketing and sales into the product. And when you have that, you have different metrics. You have things like daily active users, right? Slack, we track that a lot. Like how many people are showing and using the product every day. You track things like time to value, right? How many clicks until they get their first aha moment, right? Is that, 5 clicks? Is it 500 clicks? Why does it take so long? You track things like CSAT. You track things like product qualified leads. Have they used to pass a certain threshold where now we send them over to sales? And when you track those metrics, you can pretty much understand like, hey, is the product, do you have a problem or not, right?
Right.
And because you got to remember, sales and marketing too sometimes are incentivized to promise features that don't exist to, bring in people. There's a famous, quote from HubSpot for a long time. They were, bringing people that just weren't good fits for the company, but they were still selling it, right?
Right.
And they had to kind of make this tough decision because those people were coming in having a bad experience, and now they were saying, "Don't use HubSpot," right? And so sometimes you have to turn away deals that are maybe they're willing to buy it, but like you're a horrible fit for them, right? I was like in the world, and so Net Promoter land, Net Promoter Score. I'm a big NPS guy. You either have promoters or detractors.
Right.
And promoters are the ones that love your product. They're telling you about everyone. Detractors are like, oh my God, that was the most painful, horrible experience. Never use this software, never use this game, never use this whatever, right?
Right.
And as a founder or a C-suite member, you want to be minting out promoters, right? You want to have people come in, have this amazing experience and go out. So to do that, you have to rethink all your stuff. Like, again, is your product, is it simple? Is it helpful? Are they getting value? Even the sales experience, right? Was it a good sales experience?
Mm-hmm.
Did you just go through something that was helpful and consultative? We've all had great sales experiences. And at the same time, we've all had horrible ones that are like used car salesmen. They're just wrenching you. They're trying to get you to buy before you're ready. Maybe you bought it, but you're like, God, that was a horrible experience. I wouldn't recommend that brand for anything, right?
Like anytime you buy a car almost and you go in there for 4 hours.
Yeah, like who likes that, right?
We could have just done this paperwork and be done.
Oh my God, it's horrible. So I do think like, to that point, all these things are tied together. Your go-to-market product is a huge part of that. And the experience that you're delivering from your marketing, your sales, your product has a huge influence on these organic word of mouth recommendations, which for most SaaS companies, most software companies can be up to 40, 50% of their incoming leads.
Really?
So it's all connected together.
Well, I will say, we're not a software company. We're a people-heavy company, service.
Yeah.
It's butts and seats doing the things that we sell. And it's huge. Most of our growth, no matter how much money we spend in marketing, I can't tell you the numbers of what brand awareness stuff we've done has contributed to it, but a lot of it is just the clients we've done the best work for have gone out there and just tooted the horn, right? Yeah. And sent people our way. And that, looking at things from a standpoint of promoters or detractors, I've never really heard it put like that. That's a good way to look at it. Because we can be developing promoters, and those are our clients, right?
It's a different lens, right? And you start thinking like, hey, how do you identify your promoters? How do you give them megaphones? So like in software, a lot of times we would do is we'd find who scored us high, like a Net Promoter Score. Basically, you can score from anywhere 0 to a 10. So if someone ranked us a 10, we go, oh, that's great. Would you mind writing a review for us on this service? Or would you mind making an introduction into this other company? Or, so you can, there's a whole playbook behind that, but yeah, I at the end of the day, like I think people are people, whether it's B2C, B2B, you want to give them a great experience so that they go out and talk about you. And it's really simple marketing, but it's very effective. Yeah.
So you get into the B2B game. So what was the first B2B SaaS
So I went over
company?
to Salesforce.
Okay. Salesforce.
And Salesforce was, much, much smaller at that time. Now it's like one of the biggest SaaS companies out there. I think it has like a 293 billion market cap.
Yeah, Salesforce is something else.
But yeah, I joined, it was much smaller, and Mark was selling this crazy vision that, hey, you don't need to buy enterprise software and install it on your own servers. And you could just go to a website like Amazon and just log in and do your stuff, right? And so for me, as someone that like was intellectually curious about business and different go-to-market models, I love that because what Salesforce did was, in the past, when you sell these B2B enterprises, it was all outbound steak dinners, take them out to golf. You would try to romance the CIO, CTO to
because they're going to be dropping 6 figures just to get in, right?
Totally, right? But now you had with SaaS comes out, it's this totally different go-to-market model. Like anyone can go to the website, just type it in. There's no software that needs to be installed. So now IT isn't this massive gatekeeper, right? You don't have to go through IT. You can go directly to the end business user, business owners, business users. And so now all these innovations come down. You sell directly to them. You have concepts like free trial and freemium come out. You have different plans, land and expand, seed and grow, all these different motions. And so for me, that was super excited. And I think one of the reasons I think Mark and Salesforce brought me in was because I had a little more B2C DNA. Like I knew a little bit more modern ways to go about, do online marketing, do these different go-to-market models. And it was a blast. He's this incredible guy. He's this, amazing philanthropist. He donates so much money to children's hospitals. He's just a really good person. And I like their mission. Their mission was, hey, we want to democratize the software. Because you gotta remember in the past too, when you would sell enterprise software, only the biggest businesses could afford it. Right. You could only buy $7 million to buy, a CRM system. And all of a sudden now Salesforce comes out and it's accessible to all these small businesses. They can just log in. They don't need to have an IT person that's going to maintain these servers and install software, kind of like how Oracle was doing it. So it was a super fun experience. I loved it.
Yeah. Salesforce is interesting. We run across it a lot from the IT perspective, even a lot of our different clients. One of our biggest clients is a very heavy Salesforce user, and they're in the medical world. So they've in the clinical world, they're leveraging it as a tool to kind of be the hub for all their other tools, because they still need an EMR and a couple other, and they're using Slack for communication. Nice. And they're using Salesforce as this hub, and they've plugged in their EHR. And the owner of this company is very much a Salesforce promoter, right? Very much. He's out there doing speeches for them at conferences, trying to kind of convince other clinical type people that, hey, Salesforce just isn't this, enterprise CRM that's just for, different types of small or medium size or even enterprise business. And it's super sticky. I've got clients that use Salesforce that it's so ingrained in what they're doing right now that they're looking to hire people just to kind of manage the relationship with Salesforce and Salesforce support. Looking to literally cut back on their IT spend from a standpoint of keeping their network secure and these kind of things in order to hire a resource to make sure that all, 100 of their employees aren't having issues with Salesforce. Yeah. Right. And where they might be, their per user spend might be $500 plus a month to make things work, that everything that's plugging into Salesforce. And it's something else. I'm trying to wrap my head around what it's doing so well, because I've used it in the past. I've seen it. We didn't use it as a company, mainly because when we were small and very young, the per user cost was just way beyond what we can do. We started with HubSpot and then went into Zoho and a couple other things, and I was using HubSpot for free. Yeah. And then I started paying for the ability to use the caller that was built into HubSpot. Yeah. Right? So.
Yeah. So you just laid out classic, innovation, disruption, right? So I think, a lot of times too is software companies will continue to move up market, right? Mm-hmm. So as Salesforce got bigger, they moved up market. Yep. And they'll have someone coming underneath them, and they'll start with the SMB segment, right? And offer different plans there. But, Salesforce has always been super sticky. I think a big part too is they want multi-product, right? So they started Salesforce. It was a sales automation tool, right? Yep. And you can do, forecasts and pipeline and track all your salespeople. But then they added, marketing automation and support and, hosting, all these different elements, right? And so you'll see that a lot in the SaaS spaces. You'll have a single product, and similar with HubSpot, right? They started on the marketing side, and then they added a CRM and a sales solution. They added a support solution. Zendesk, where I was at, started with support, and then they added sales and different elements. So it's kind of a classic playbook. But the good thing is there's more and more tools that are accessible to businesses of all sizes, and I think that's a great thing. Whether they're on free plans or paid plans, it's this democratization of access to all these amazing tools out right now. There's never been, I think there's never been a better time.
Of things, right?
No shortage. Never a better time to start a business. There's so many tools that are going to help you to really supersize that business that it's an amazing time.
Okay. So perfect. I'm going to segue into stuff because you just didn't even plan this, but light bulb just went off. Okay. So many tools. Great time to start a business. I try to tell people that all the time. I'll tell them, I was an employee for a long time. I couldn't go back to doing that. Yeah. But okay, so let's say I'm getting out of that. I'm going to start a small business. There's so many tools. Yes. How do I know what's good? What's just distraction? I'm paralyzed, all that. I'm analyzing all these things. This is going to give good. This person wants a lot of money. Yeah. This person's promising me all this stuff. And if we were going to, and I'm big on, principles, right? There's methods and principles. Principles generally stay the same, and you can apply the different methods to getting things done. So if you were to talk to somebody okay, you're getting started, focus on this. What would you tell them to do? And what are some of those basic tools you might pepper in there?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So one, I would say like, hey, buying software, even if your business doesn't have to be different than the consumer side, right? So like, just as like, I go to Amazon and I'm like, all right, there's 7 different versions of this product that just came up. Which am I going to buy? Well, which is highest rated, and read some reviews. They have the same thing in B2B now, right? Like there are, services like Trust Radius or G2 Crowd where you can go and they have rankings for all these different types of software, right? Or you do what you do is, ask fellow friends, colleagues, hey, what are you using, right? Oh, I love this one. It's amazing. That's probably a good one to use, right? To start off with there. But as far as like base core tools.
Or even mindset, or what should they be focusing on? Focus on this, find a good tool to do that. Focus on this, find a good person to do that.
Yeah. I mean, so just my 2 cents, I would focus 100% now on finding tools that leverage AI to impact your business. Whatever your business is, find about how the AI is going to make, basically make one person be able to do the work of 10 people. Right. Okay. Yep. And I see that too. So, after I did, the Salesforce, the Zendesk, the Slack, there's some IPOs in there. Like I started to run my own business and I'm just a single person shop. Right. But AI comes along and it's completely helping me, right? It's helping me with so many different tasks. And I just am about to announce like a new business that I'm doing. It's called SaaS CMO Pro. And it's basically like where anyone can learn about marketing. All the questions you're asking, you want to learn about marketing, tech marketing, I'm filming all these videos on it, but like I would have never been able to do all that without the help of all these different AI tools and ChatGPT and helping me create videos and helping with copy and helping with the name of my company and just all these different elements there. So if I was starting a small business today, I would really lean into the tools that are going to have that AI power that is going to basically, give you a supercharge for building your business out, make you much more efficient.
When it comes to past Salesforce, you jumped into, was it Zendesk next?
Yeah, Zendesk, I came in like maybe about 50 people. I was
so they were still really small then.
Yeah, very small. I was a CMO brought in. There were maybe 1 or 2 people working on the team and I built out that team out. Took them through an IPO.
With each of these transitions, was it just time to do something new or what was kind of...
Most of the companies I worked at were 3 or 4 years, right? And it's actually different. A lot of people in tech will do 1 year and go to the next one, the next one. But for me, it was like, I just felt like it was a good time. Like for all these, I'm like, did I leave it in a better state than I came in? And Salesforce is in a really good state at that point. They're growing great. For me, I like a more modern playbook. So for me, in a weird way, I like coming into a company that hasn't built out their marketing yet because I've got a whiteboard. There's no like, hey, we've been doing it this way. We have to do it this way. I can build the team from scratch. I can bring in people that are more willing to do a more modern playbook. And Zendesk was perfect for that, right? Like I thought they had a good product, but they really needed to amp up their marketing. And we just helped them, everything from the content, the SEO, the branding, the messaging, the positioning, the marketing ops, all these different core elements to get them a place where they were, ready to go IPO. And we did go IPO.
Very cool. And then after Zendesk, Slack, right?
Yeah. So similar after, had an IPO, I thought they were in great shape. And, there's this little company Slack and they were in the messaging space or collaboration space. And, same thing. I really like the product. I like this way of communicating with people via channels versus email. I just thought email, if you kind of look back in the day, email was never invented for teams. It was
for these conversations like it started into.
Nothing, right? It's all opaque and everyone has been like in a 40 reply all. It's a horrible tool. I don't know people that are like, I love email. It's great. So, Slack comes along and I just thought it was a great challenge, right? Because a very crowded space at the time, collaboration, it was a new way of doing things. When you market a product that people haven't experienced before, don't know it, it's a very different, motion that you're using. And how do we get this out and accelerate it to be, one of the fastest growing B2B SaaS companies of all time? And so I loved it. It was an amazing experience and it was so fun. And again, in a weird way, they went IPO and then were eventually acquired by Salesforce, which was the first one I worked with. So I think it was for $30 billion. So it was a great kind of reunion there.
Oh yeah. So what do you think it was? What was the magic with Slack? Was it timing? Was it what they were doing? Was it the right time to kind of speed up and make kind of inter-team communication faster? Or what do you think? Because they just went crazy.
Yeah, there was a lot of elements. I get asked that a lot. It's actually one of the videos I've done on the SaaS CMO Pro channel, which is like, how did Slack get so big so fast, right? So I think there was definitely a lot of things on the product side, right? Like people at that point were starting to get used to messaging, right? They were using messaging in their personal lives and like, hey, could that paradigm could be transferred over to business. I do think a lot of it came down to go to market, right? Like we had
other companies were doing this. There was other products.
It's not like, look, I was using, we talk about Cases Ladder and gaming. Yeah. I was using like ICQ and AIM back in the day, right? Like that was very similar, right? So yes, it's new technology. Yes, it's not new technology, right?
The same principle was being done. You just
same principle,
right?
But the go-to-market was radically different. So where we tried to innovate at Slack was a lot of B2B SaaS companies didn't even have a free trial, right? You would just go straight to a salesperson, right?
Yeah.
What we did is we said, we're not even gonna have a free trial. We're gonna have a free plan. And not just a free plan, it is gonna be a super feature-rich plan that you can do pretty much anything, right?
Loss lead it.
Yeah, and so we made it super easy to invite others. We reduced friction. We spent a lot of time on increasing time to value. We did a lot of different content, a lot of ad campaigns that got people out. We focus much more on a see and grow model. So a lot of times, like software companies will come in and go, "Oh, we want to get this company to use it. We're going to sell top down to the CEO and get them to buy it for everywhere." What we would do is we would say, "Hey, we're fine with letting these small little instances come up, right?" And so IBM, I remember like it was some small team in like Southeast Asia design team that started using us. And then it started to spread to another team and another team. And we built it in, we priced it intentionally so any team could start using it basically for free. And when they got big enough to get to access more of the enterprise requirements were things like single sign-on and provisioning and deprovisioning, like that you had to pay for, right? But so it was, and again, this is coming from the go-to-market guy. Like I think like a lot of the go-to-market we did was very different than other SaaS companies at the time. And I think internally too, we, talk about what we talked about a little bit earlier was we were intensely focused on the experience. So we measured Net Promoter Score. We were very religious on that. That was one of our top 3 metrics. Daily active users was the second biggest metric we had, getting people to come and use it every day, have a good experience with it. And then ARR was our third one, annual recurring revenue. But very different metrics even than I think a typical SaaS company would have. So a very customer-centric organization combined with a very modern go-to-market model, combined with a product that just worked really well. I think all that contributed to a skyrocketing of growth.
Yeah, I that's kind of what my experience was with Zoom in the early days. It seems like it wasn't that long ago. It was probably over almost 10 years ago. And they kind of became, even though Skype was around and everyone was starting to say Skype, even though they could have been using everything, right? I think COVID had a big play on Zoom because they hit with their go-to-market was that free. I didn't even know Zoom had a paid model at the time. It was just free. We all just used it, and it was in our company, and it wasn't even quote unquote sanctioned by the company. We just kind of started using it, and and eventually it grew to a point where we needed those extra features. So on the front end with Slack, when you're giving so much of the house away for free, where are you generating revenue at that point? Yeah, so
there's kind of a misconception, and I've done a video on this just on Freemium, where a lot of people think like, oh, you're giving away free, like that's a bad thing, right? Like free users are bad.
My principle is be willing to go the extra mile, give without any expectation of receiving first.
Totally.
Right.
And what you end up having is your brand awareness skyrockets, right? So the way I thought about it is like Slack, we had like 10 million free users, for instance. I didn't look at that as, we had 10 million people that were costing us money.
Mooches.
I looked at it as like, hey, I just hired 10 million free marketers, right? That are out there constantly talking about our plan and recommending it and getting us into new markets. And that was incredibly powerful because you remember as a marketer, if you don't have that legion, well, then what do you have to do? Okay, I need to go spend money, Brian. I need to go run an event. I need to go hire this PR firm that costs us much. I need to go do a 7-figure ad campaign to get the word out. So even though free users technically cost, like there's a support cost, there's a bandwidth cost to it.
Somewhere.
You're going to be spending it somewhere, right? So I was a big believer in the free plan, and they were, that was a huge element of getting it out and moving it forward.
I talk to folks about that a lot too, is be willing to give some, and in a SaaS company, you got to create a product. It's got to work well enough when people use it, they're happy about it, but believe in it enough where you could give it away and they're just going to go, shout to the heavens about how much they like it.
And what you'll find too is in SaaS or software, so traditionally you'll break it down to 3 segments, right? You'll have an SMB segment, small to medium-sized businesses, small businesses. You have mid-market, which is like medium-sized businesses, and you have enterprises, right? Big companies.
Yep.
So usually what you'll find is that the SMB segments, you don't make as much money on those companies, but they're a huge segment. Just in raw numbers, there's a ton of them. Ton of them, right? So they are kind of like your marketing engine, right? They're the ones, like, if you really penetrate that segment, get it out, tons of people are talking about, they're switching jobs or bringing tech in. Mid-market and enterprise, though, is where you tend to make your money. And so with Slack, again, we had a plan that allowed these instances to start forming in companies like Adobe or IBM or Google, right? Small pockets. But as they started to expand within the organization, they would need to upgrade to the professional or the enterprise plan because they needed things like provisioning and deprovisioning users. They needed compliance exports. They needed SSO. They needed, an SLA of 99.99% uptime. They needed a dedicated customer success manager, right? They needed 1-hour response times. And so a lot of times, and again, this is more advanced pricing and packaging. Again, SaaS CMO Pro, if you want to learn about that stuff. But like sometimes you'll go down this path of you will differentiate your software purely based off features. So, the enterprise plan gets everything, but the free plan only gets 2 features. And I call it like crippleware. Yeah. And this is a different way of doing it where you give from a user perspective for Zoom or for, Slack, you pretty much get access to everything. You're like, oh, this is great, right? But in an enterprise requirements perspective, that's where you have to upgrade to the plans, and that's where you make your money. So again, these free users are kind of like subsidized marketing, and you're still making your money, but it's just a different go-to-market model on how to do it.
Yeah. So in listening to you, we're talking about, so much of your experience in software, but I made a connection, and this is something myself and my business partner have been talking about with our business, because one of the things we're struggling with, and particularly in our revenue cycle management, so RCM, it's billing, coding, helping medical practices make money, right? Yeah. So same kind of segmentation happens there. There's the small 1 or 2 person clinics, and then there's the mediums, or maybe it's group of doctors, and then you got network hospitals, right? Yeah. And one of our struggles is we want all those little ones that everybody kind of, it's the outcasts, because no one's figured out how to provide the service for that small company at such a high level, because they all look at it from a standpoint of, if I give them everything that I can do for a medium or big business, I'm gonna be in the red, because I'm going to be giving them so much. There's no way they could individually generate enough revenue that a percentage of that would pay for what I'm doing for them. Sure. But if you take those on and you don't do a good job, you're creating detractors. Yeah. Right. But if you can take them on, figure out, what are you willing to do if you can give them everything, and maybe like you're selling a printer or like you're selling whatever else that's a loss leader, if you can figure out how to create such rabid, raving promoters out of those guys, that they're a better marketer than you could ever have with SEO or have on social or have anywhere else, right? Yeah, totally. It's a different mindset. Like when you look in the world as, am I mincing out promoters or am I mincing out detractors? Like you just look at things very differently. You're like, what is the experience we're giving them? What is that sales experience? What is their onboarding experience, right? I remember when I used to buy software, a CMO, we'd buy a lot of software. Like sometimes I'd have like 10 people whining and dining me to buy the software. And then the minute I bought it, they all ran away. And I was assigned like 1/1000th of a customer success manager, right? That I would get like literally like 5 minutes of their time once a year. So, you tend to think like, well, is that the right move? Maybe we should be spending more resources onboarding our customers, right? And making sure they are successful. Maybe we're tracking the run metrics, right? Like, are we tracking net promoter score? Are we tracking daily? It's just like, it's a very different mindset. And again, like I'm not saying that's the only way to grow. There's lots of ways you can grow, but they all have different capital efficiencies. And what you're finding out now is, especially within SaaS, within tech, with the higher interest rates, the valuations went way down, right? And so all these companies now are having to be profitable. They're having to grow efficiently. And it's something I always talk with the clients I work with when I advise them on marketing or go to market is like, hey,
you have to think about how you're going to grow capital efficiently, right? So you're going to have the right magic number and the right ROI and all these different metrics. And a big part of that is like, well, how are you growing? Are you growing brute force? Are you only growing by outbound sales? Do you have an inbound model? Okay, that's a little bit better. Are you running ads? Maybe it's a little expensive. Do you have SEO? Okay, that's better. But hey, do you have a raving, group of fans that love you that are spreading? That's really efficient, right? That's like one of the most.
And give them an ability to spread that message, right?
Totally. Give them a megaphone again. And so that's where all these things are interconnected. Your pricing and packaging, how sales works with marketing, like how do you, build the metrics you track. Like it's just, it's a fun thought exercise. And I kind of wish more companies would go down the promoter detractor path, because like as an average user too, like that's I'd much rather work with a company that's obsessed with giving me a good experience than someone that's just like, okay, we're going to pay like 100 salespeople, 7 figures, 6 figures, just so they can buy it. And then we're never going to help them after that because who cares? Screw them. We got our money, right?
Fun.
Like who wants to work with that company?
Yeah, absolutely. So this whole time we made it all the way to Slack. Now you're doing what you're doing today. Macaitis Advisory, right?
Yeah. So I had, when I had finished with Slack, it was kind of like, what do I do? I'm way too young to retire and I'm terrible at golf. And it was like, but as you can tell, like I've always been super passionate about like growing and scaling businesses. And there were a lot of other startups in the SaaS or AI field that wanted help with this. So I started taking on board roles or advisory roles. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And I still do that. I love that. But then I kind of realized too, like I started to recognize I was getting a lot of the same questions, and I was like, how can I wanted to kind of democratize this information, right? And there wasn't a lot of sources where you could go just to learn about marketing, learn about tech marketing.
It's very much gated.
Yeah, all these topics we're talking about, right? And so I created a new startup, SaaS CMO Pro. I'm actually formally rolling it out literally within this week. So you're one of the first ones to, formally hear about it.
Cool. All right. We got the scoop.
You got the scoop here. I've gone and recorded, about 50 videos on every single one of these topics, how to measure marketing, how to build a brand, how to do pricing and packaging, how to tap into evangelism marketing, right? All these different elements of marketing for tech, SaaS, AI companies. And, it's going to be super accessible. You can watch them. So, go to SaaSCMOPro.com. If that's interesting for you, for anyone that's listening, you want to, learn a little bit more about marketing and these topics. Like that's what I'm about. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. I've been working on this for a while. And that's where it was like, I had to build out the studio. And that's where it was like, I learned all about like different camera angles.
That is slick. I'm jealous.
So, yeah, it was a ton of fun, and it's something that's, I've been super excited to be part of.
Send me your shopping list. Send me your Amazon cart for all that stuff.
Well, it's funny. I'm talking about all these clients, Brian, and the number one question I would get is, well, Bill, what camera are you using? It looks really good on Zoom, or what microphone? So I literally just finished this like 60-minute video walking through the studio and, showing all the different camera angles, and I use a prompter, which is cool.
Yeah.
Like, so it can look people.
Cables.
A lot of cables. Yeah, it's a lot there to kind of switch these things around. Yeah. But, it's been a lot of fun.
That is awesome. So this whole time, years and years and years, building, growing fruit on the tree to what you're doing now. Besides being successful and doing a great job and becoming what seems to me, even though we just met, a really cool, down-to-earth, level-headed, humble dude.
Thank you.
What brings you joy through all this? Did you start a family? Do you have hobbies? Yeah. Are you still going back to your old Windows 98 PC and playing Command and Conquer? What are you doing to kind of fulfill the purpose? Business is business and work is work, and it brings men like us a lot of that brings joy, believe me too. But what's happening outside of everything we've been discussing?
Well, yeah. So, I feel incredibly fortunate and humble just to be on a journey like this. And like any journey, you get so many good people that helped you throughout the years. And I think it's kind of why I wanted to do SaaS CMO Pro was help other people that are building their businesses, right? And give back.
That's why we do this too. I'm just trying to bridge a gap.
Totally.
So many people get kind of pushed down and think they can't do it. It's like, man, if I could catch those people before they have a really bad experience and think about, giving up or just going a different way. So
yeah, so important. So I've always loved that. Let's see, what do I nerd out on? I'm a big Star Trek Next Generation fan. So
really, like the original 80s show.
So this is the Next Generation. So this is one with Patrick Stewart, Picard. So I've got my
Yeah, so that was
here. You know,
like
that's
I used to watch that when I was a kid, and
engage, make it so.
Right. I remember I'd sit down, and watch that in the evening. I've never gone back to watch them all again, but that was of all the Star Treks, that's the only one I ever watched.
It's fun. I love that. I'm a big gardener, so
you got a green thumb.
I've got a green thumb. Well, no, I think anyone that's getting into gardening, you always start with a black thumb and you just
everything dies.
Like I've killed a lot of plants off. I'm sorry, but now I've kind of learned, I think, how to do it. So I love that. I grew up in Chicago during the Super Bowl Shuffle, 85 Bears. So I'm always a big Bears fan. I
don't know if you know, but we're in Sheboygan, just north of Chicago.
Are?
My office here is Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So we're only a couple hours north of Chicago.
I won't hold that against you if you're a Packers fan, but
I am not.
I understand.
So I grew up in Texas. You probably won't like who I'm a fan of either. But
yeah, Cowboys. No, that's all good. I like it. No, it's fun. And it's weird too, because like you move and I would think like the 49ers, since I've been here, have been way more successful than the Bears have. But for some reason, you just get like, I'm still super loyal to this team that I grew up with as a kid, So I like watching that. We're just
gluttons for punishment when our teams do weird, disappointing things.
Right? Totally. So then I've got a daughter, and so obviously love spending time with my family and going out. And I think you have to have the right balance there. But, it's just, I've been fortunate because the business stuff I just naturally love. So it doesn't feel like work for me. And it's just something that I feel very fortunate with. Yeah,
same thing here. I talk to my wife a lot who, we're super blessed that, we've got 4 kiddos and she retired, almost, it'll be 8 or 9 years ago when I met my business partners and we started this game.
Yeah.
But I'm just blessed to kind of have her doing that. And we talk a lot about, a lot of the times it seems like I'm having too much fun working. But with fun comes, the stress of, you sacrifice certain things too as well. So
absolutely.
But okay. So you like Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah. And I still love games, I don't have as much time now, but at some point, I'm going to get,
I still spend money on goofy stuff and I never hardly get to touch it anymore, But that's why I have so many kids. I can watch my son playing at home and I'll be like, okay, that looks fun. But I'm way too tired. I got to go to bed. I can't get involved in this right now.
Yeah, I keep buying new platforms and games and I don't have enough time to play them. But at some point I will. And, but being a dad is fantastic. I think that's one of the most rewarding things I've been a part of.
So do you still keep in touch with a lot of guys from the past that kind of you guys got started with? Yeah,
certainly. So I know you had a chance to talk with Jay Severson. So, one of the founders of chess.com, and Jay's fantastic.
I'm going to try to connect with him. I'm going to try to get him to Wisconsin. He loves racing. See if I can get him to Road America.
Oh yeah. He's a big racer. I think you saw a sim in his background. Yeah. He built out a crazy setup there. So that's cool. And so certainly, it's like those initial gaming connections are so important, right? And I think a lot of the friends that I have now are still from kind of back in the day. But yeah, it's great. Every time we have a chance to catch up, I'm always for that.
Awesome, Bill. Well, this has been great. We're just over an hour here, and I've used a ton of your time, which is super valuable. But so much stuff you've shared with me. I'm going to have to go back and kind of pour over this information because on purpose, I tried to learn a lot today. But I'm going to dig into what you're doing now. I think even though it's got that focus on SaaS, everything that you taught me today, I think can be applied to different types of businesses as well. So
that's awesome.
Appreciate that so much. Thanks so much for sharing.
Hey, it was an honor being here. Thanks again for having me on, Brian. I appreciate it.